Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to talk to you about the books that I read in the month of September. So September was an interesting reading month. I feel like overall it was a bit of a mid-reading month. I only really had like one really standout book, but I didn't really read very many bad books either. It was kind of all over the place. Definitely fully participated in Shorty September, as you will see, because I feel like my page count was lower than normal in September and that I read less because we went back to our homeschool group. But also, I feel like I finished a lot of things because I read like some very short things. I'm going to have this divided up into genres, so if you want to skip around, you can. I'm going to start out with classics. So I finally read Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky. This is one of his last like major works that I haven't read yet, and major, it's short, it's quite short. I definitely picked it up because of Shorty September. It wasn't initially in my plan of classics to read this year, but I'm glad that I finally did pick it up. It's really kind of an interesting experience to read it. I still am kind of like scratching my head a little bit after finishing it, and yet there's so much of it that was so fascinating and that I really enjoyed. But just know, if you're going into this book, you are very much in the head of the narrator of this book, and he spends the first third of the book just kind of talking philosophically about life and anything that might have anything to do with it. Some of those things are funny, but a lot of them are not. And then he goes into like basically all of this, all of my worldview here reminds me of this one incident in my life. And we fast forward back about 15 years to some interactions that he had with some men that were in his social circle, and also some interactions that he had with a young woman. So you can see some of these themes very clearly carried over into Crime and Punishment, but I think Crime and Punishment executed it much better because there's a plot that you invest in more, and because this book started out so slow and everything just felt like this narrator took everything personally, it made it harder for me to really get invested in what was happening. But still, I thought that it was very interesting commentary on human nature and social conventions of Dostoevsky's day. Speaking of Shorty September, I reread a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe stuff, and this was partly in preparation for teaching Edgar Allan Poe to my American literature class at our homeschool group during the month of October. So I reread The Raven, which I love, and it's so fun. We're going to do that entirely in class together, and it's just such a brilliant poem. As I think probably one of the first things that I read from Poe, and actually my daughter read it years and years and years ago, and she's just now starting to read some of Poe's other works. She's in 8th grade, so she's old enough now that she's at the age where I was when I started like reading his works a lot, because Poe does get really, really dark. I also reread The Telltale Heart and The Cask of Amontillado, which we're going to discuss about and contrast them, because they both center around kind of like an unreliable narrator like committing a murder, but the messaging that Poe has in both of those short stories are different. And so I think that's going to be really fun to talk about. I also reread The Mask of the Red Death, which I think is really fascinating to reread. The last time I reread it, I think it was 2021 or 2022. Reading anything that talks about any sort of plague or pandemic kind of a thing always hits different after you've lived through one. So it's interesting. I find the imagery and the symbolism in Mask of the Red Death to be so fascinating. I think the very first Edgar Allan Poe thing that I did read was actually Murders in the Rue Morgue, because it's the first short story in this collection. And I reread that one as well, and we'll be doing that with my class because a lot of people attribute Poe with spooky things and murder and gore, which there's quite a bit of in his stories, especially considering the time period that they were written. They're a lot more brutal than a lot of other works that came out around the same time. But what most people don't know is that Poe is actually the father of the modern detective story, and that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle patterned Sherlock Holmes off of Poe's detective. So I felt like I would be remiss to not include that in American literature, an introduction into Auguste Dupin. And so, yeah, so we're going to be talking about that as well. It's actually my favorite of his detective stories that he wrote, because he wrote several with this detective being central in them. This one and The Murder of Marie Roget and then The Purloined Letter all have the same detective, but you also have like The Gold Bug and maybe a couple of other kind of like mystery type ones. So most people associate Poe with horror, but he wrote a decent amount of mystery as well. The last classic that I'm going to talk about is actually my favorite book of the month. So I'm kind of getting that out of the way early, unfortunately. I can like to talk about my favorites at the end. I probably should have put classics at the end. This book is one that I've been looking forward to reading for a long time. I've had it on my shelves for years, and people are always shocked when they find out that I had not read Fahrenheit 451. I'm a self-proclaimed Bradbury fangirl at this point. I just love pretty much everything that I've read by him, except there's a couple of his short stories that just haven't quite landed for me, but most of them have, and this is the third of his novels that I've read, and it's my favorite so far. I love a good classic dystopian novel, and I kind of was under the impression that this book was going to be different than it was, because I knew it was about book burning, and everyone had said that it is, and the cover is quite clever with the book and the matches. And so we follow a man named Guy Montag, and he's a fireman, but instead of putting out fires, he creates fires to burn books. That was the premise that I knew about, and so I assumed the entirety of this book was really going to focus heavily on censorship and banning books. But the thing that was really crazy about this book is that most of the people in this dystopian world have no desire for books. They have stopped reading books long before that, and there are very few people that get caught with books. Most people don't even desire it, and they see books as dangerous. So much of what Bradbury imagined a futuristic dystopian world could look like 75 years ago is startlingly similar to the trajectory that our world is on now, especially when he talks about the relationship to technologies and screens in particular. It's like very startlingly relevant and current, which is often true with dystopian books, and that's why they have stood the test of time, is because like 1984, like so many of the themes in that, it's like really scary to see how that has played out in modern day. But anyways, this was fabulous. It was really, really thought-provoking, chilling at times, but not bereft of hope in pure Bradbury fashion. I read a couple of nonfictions this month. So one of them is called The Small and the Mighty. This is written by Sharon McMahon of Sharon Says So, and this is a story of 12 lesser known or practically unknown Americans who changed and shaped the course of our nation. So I listened to this entirely on audio, and Sharon herself actually narrates it, which I always love it when authors can narrate their own books, because then you can really hear their tone and their inflection and how they meant for the book to kind of be taken. Like sometimes you can take written word one way or another way in terms of tone. And so when someone's reading their own book, that's perfect. You know exactly how they meant for you to take it. So there were things I liked about this book. I really thought that there were a lot of things that were interesting. There were a lot of things I didn't know. Sometimes it was really interesting how she would interweave all these different stories together, but sometimes I actually found that really frustrating because I couldn't figure out who exactly it was that we were supposed to focus on. Sometimes some of the 12 people, I'm like, who are the 12 people? Because there's more than 12 people here. And so sometimes that could be confusing. Some of the people that she called like lesser known people actually went on to become like state senators or members of presidential cabinets. And to me, that doesn't seem like an unknown American or someone that was just like nobody on the sidelines that ended up making a big impact. So I don't know. There was also things, the thing that bothered me the most is that there was a lot of times where she would insert her own feelings or opinions on what people might have thought or said in a situation instead of what actually happened, or if we don't know, saying just we don't know how this played out and leaving it at that. She'd say something like, we don't know exactly what happened, but we can imagine it might play out like this. And then she'd have these real people talk in like very modern slang dialogue. So she'd say things similar to, you could imagine that he'd be like, "Oh, no, you didn't. That's so stupid," and, like, stuff like that, and that just drove me crazy because I'm like, "Okay, this is supposed to be a history book, and you are putting quite a bit of what you assume you would feel in that situation and assuming that's how those people would feel." And so I felt like there was a lot of her own thoughts and opinions that shaped how she presented situations instead of just facts. I'm not looking for a dry, like, textbook, just facts, because there were a lot of times she talked about things and I really liked them. But there was just, I don't know, there was just so much of herself in the book that it made it feel like it was like her, it would have worked better as a podcast, I guess, is what I'm saying, because it was just like her telling you about these things, which didn't feel as much of what I was looking for, I think. I don't know if I'm even describing this well, but it just felt so colloquial and it just kind of was annoying to me that the way that it felt so modernized at times, in the way that she would talk about how people thought or felt like she would feel the same way. But then she also would remind us often of, like, okay, these people are doing these great things, but they also did these not great things, because everyone has blind spots, you included, and there will be things that people look back and notice that you didn't do this well, but we just do the best that we can where we are right now. And I thought that that was a really good reminder. I also read 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You, which is kind of funny because The Small and the Mighty is about 12 people. And then I've got 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. This was a really good book. This is a Christian nonfiction, so it is written from a Christian perspective about having a healthy relationship with technology, your phone in particular. And so it was very interesting to be reading this at the exact same time as Fahrenheit 451. There's some really interesting crossovers, especially in terms of, like, how reading is affected by technology on your phone. But I felt like this author had a very well-rounded approach, because he would talk about, like, here's some detrimental things that happen with our phone, but he wasn't like, so you should get rid of your phone. He was basically like, technology is a gift and can be used for a lot of great things. It's a necessary part of life. Phones are not going anywhere. So we need to learn how to put healthy boundaries and parameters around, mostly a lot of what he's talking about is social media usage, but, you know, your phone in general. And so I thought that it was really helpful while also being, like, really balanced. I read a decent amount of fantasies this month, and by decent amount I mean 3. I finished The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington, and I started this book in August. This is the first in the Lycanius trilogy, and this is James Islington's debut novel, which I find very impressive because we have a really, really, like, intricate magic system and really great world building that I found to be really fascinating. There's definitely, like, some political maneuverings that are happening here because you have people who have this ability to use something. I think it's called the essence. I might be forgetting that because at this point that I'm filming this, it's been almost a month since I finished it. But they have the ability to use these powers, but there was a war between, like, the regular people and these people who could use these powers. So there have been laws put in place as to how they're allowed to use them and binding them in certain situations. And so we're finding out that there is this person who is terrible and has been, like, banished essentially. And the place where he was banished to, they put up, like, this magical wall, essentially keeping that realm separate. And we're finding out that the boundaries are weakening. We have people who are essentially going on quests to try to figure out what is going on. And it's very interesting because it's a lot deeper than that. And I can't tell you very much, but there's a lot of political intrigue, which I love in a fantasy novel. I don't love it in real life, but in a fantasy novel, I sure do. So yeah, it was just really interesting. I found myself not loving it quite as much as I had hoped. I had hoped this would be like a knock it out of the park 5 stars for me, and it wasn't quite. And I think it's because the plot was really good and the world building was really good, but I didn't feel all that attached to any of the characters by the time the story was over. Like, I liked them, but they didn't feel as, like, fully fleshed out as they could have. Granted, they might within the next couple of books, and also the fact that this is James Islington's debut makes me a lot more lenient about those kinds of things. I also finally read Blood Over Brighthaven. I say finally, it's only been out for like a year or something like that, but I loved Sword of Kaigen so much, so I just could not wait to dive into Blood Over Brighthaven. My sister bought it for me this summer, and so I was really happy to finally read it. I actually vlogged it for my Patreon last month, which was really fun. This is kind of a dark academia type fantasy. We follow a woman named Siona, and she wants to become a mage, and mages are people who weave magical spells and do all kinds of stuff. It's kind of like a scientific field in this world, though. It's not just like mystical, like there are boundaries, there are things that you do, there is experimentation that happens, there's lots of research that goes into it, so it very much feels like an academic, like scientific field. And no woman has ever been admitted to become a high mage. So she is going before them to take this exam, and they only do it once a decade to prove that they're giving women a chance, but they don't think women have it cut out to become a high mage. And so she's in a very misogynistic society. She ends up blowing their socks off and making it into the magistry, like at the very beginning of the book. And then we just kind of follow her journey from there as this city lives inside of this bubble that protects them from something called the blight, which is this disease that's ravaging the people and the plants outside of the city. And so they live inside this domed city that protects them from the blight. And so they're wanting to expand the dome so that way their city can become larger. And as Siona is endeavoring to move forward on this project and doing research to try to make the best spellcast that she can for this, it's just a very, very interesting story. I thought that the storyline itself was fantastic. I thought that the world building and the magic system was really, really interesting. However, I felt like the messaging in this book was so heavy-handed that it irritated me a lot of the time when I was reading this book, so that made it really disappointing for me. I agree with like a lot of the messages that Emma Wong was communicating, and that like racism's bad, misogyny is bad, all that kind of stuff. Totally agree with all of that, but she just really just sledgehammered you with it. It was like she didn't trust her reader to make the connections, and there was zero nuance in what she was saying. It's a shame because I feel like this could have been an amazing book, and I felt like Sword of Kaigen had really nuanced messaging and conversations about motherhood and marriage, and I felt like nothing about Blood Over Brighthaven was nuanced at all. And so it made it a much less enjoyable reading experience for me. I also read a cozy fantasy. Who even am I? I picked this up because I thought it looked really cute when I was at my local library, and that's The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. I loved the purple sprayed edges, and I loved the cover, and it just sounded so cozy. So in this book, we follow a librarian who is a librarian in this huge city that is experiencing some political upheaval. Her sidekick is a sentient spider plant who was assumedly created by mistake, and so she has to flee the city when this political uprising ends up spilling into the city itself, and the library, it starts being set on fire. So she rescues as many books as she can and flees to an island far away that she was actually born on. And she starts just kind of really getting to know the people and the community on this island, and she wants to help them, but you're not allowed to have any spells unless you are permitted by the government, and she is not, but she has all these spell books. So she decides she wants to help the community with these spells, but she calls them remedies, so it's kind of like under wraps. But she does that like kind of like in the back room, so to speak, because she fronts as a shop that's selling jam. And so it's so cozy. It's really funny at times. It's cheesy at times. There are things about it that I was kind of like, that's kind of dumb, but it was still fun. It was a really good bedtime read. That's when I was reading it. It was kind of like, if I fall asleep during this, I'm not gonna like miss anything. So it's just like a light, fluffy popcorn, brainless read that was like basically like a 3-star read. It was fine. I also read a cozy mystery this month. I know, who am I? This was actually for my in-person book club. I read Shady Hollow by Juno Black. This is essentially like Beatrix Potter, but make it mystery, like Agatha Christie. Someone at my book club actually said it was like Zootopia. I could see that too. So in this little town, we have all these different animals and they're all personified, but there are no humans. So we've got a fox who is a reporter and she's on the case because there's been a murder in their lovely little community. And the person who finds out about the murderer is the town busybody who just happens to be a hummingbird, flitting in and out of everybody's business. The police officers are bears, like lazy black bears that like to lay in the sun and go fishing. There's a bookstore, and the person who owns the bookstore is a raven named Lenore, and it's called Nevermore Books. There's a big friendly moose who owns a coffee shop. And so, like, I feel like the animals' personalities and their actual species was like very clever the way that she tied it together. I didn't feel like it was anything like super revolutionary in terms of plot, but I thought the writing was just really cozy, really atmospheric. Like scenes were really, really well described. And then it was fun. Like I really liked it. So I'm really not a cozy mystery girly, but if I was, I would totally be continuing on with this series because I thought it was really fun. I read one Japanese cozy book in the month of September, which is a shame because it wasn't any of the ones that I was hoping to read. It was one that I had on my Kindle that sounded like it would be good, and it's called She and Her Cat. And this is a collection of like short stories that are interconnected about people and their cats. And I don't know, I just felt like this was really lacking in a lot of ways. I almost DNF'd it, but then I was almost done with it. And I have been on an incredibly high DNF streak. And I don't really talk about DNFs on my channel all that much. So I was just kind of like, I don't want to DNF another book. I want to finish something. So I finished it and I just felt like very, very lackluster about it. So we have the stories of the people and then the cats that they meet, but you get the perspective of the cats as well. And it just didn't feel very cohesive to me. I didn't feel emotionally moved by any of the stories. And it just all felt kind of like cheesy and boring to me. So I was hoping it would come together in the end and I would be glad that I finished it, but it didn't. And I'm not. Lastly, I have graphic novels and manga. So I did finish Attack on Titan Volume 19. And I liked this one. I can't even like, it really didn't make that big of an impact on me, I guess. There's a lot of battle scenes. And I really liked this time around. I was able to read it in the actual book form. And as a result, I feel like the artwork had a much bigger impact on me because I'm used to reading it on my phone. And sometimes you have double panels. I'm trying to see if I can find one. And when you have those double panels, like that they create a big picture on 2 pages, it just really makes a really big impact in how the story is being told. And I always feel like I'm missing that impact a little bit when I am reading digitally. So here's an example. This is like an explosion starting. And I feel like normally I would just see just this page and then I'd flip and see just this page. But I feel like altogether, I know it's stupid. Obviously, it's going to make a bigger impact if you can see the whole thing. But yeah, I can't tell you anything about this though, because there were some really interesting things that happened, but they would all be spoilery because I'm more than halfway through the series at this point. I also read the cutest and most fun graphic novel. It's like a middle grade graphic novel called Whoa, a house cat story of despair. This is just so much fun. This is the story of a cat who is just this like cranky house cat and how she's acting. So like here she is in a carrier and how much she hates it. And here she is home saying, no prison can hold me. And so there's times where she gets mad and gives these evil looks. And like in this case, she's mad until she gets fed. And then she says, I am appeased. So they're just like cute little panels that are really fun. It's a little sad at the end, but mostly it was really funny. And I had such a good time reading it. Well, those are all the books that I read in September. A lot of shorter works that I just kind of blew through. Most of the books, unfortunately, were not like new favorites. I think Fahrenheit 451 is the only one that was. But I would love to hear from you in the comments down below if you have read any of the books that I talked about here. Of course, I would love to hear your thoughts, but I would also love to hear how your reading has been going. Did you have a good reading month in September? Was it kind of meh like mine? And I would love to hear what your favorite book was that you read in the month of September. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.